this episode of Therapy Bites Art Lab.
Hey guys, welcome once again to Therapy Bites Art Lab, and today we're going to talk about the magic of making matters worse. Did you know that reality is not constructed out there? Reality is constructed where? Right inside of the vault of your own brain. Today we'll talk about how we can make matters better or how we can make matters worse just based on how we decide to think about things. Join us on the episode coming up.
Welcome to Therapy Bites Art Lab, where Dr. Heath and his special guests share real-life stories of helping and healing, fresh from the actual therapy couch, while taking a bite out of common counseling missteps and misconceptions. And now, here's Heath and the T-Ball team.
And we're going to talk about making some magic in your life, but sometimes the magic is more of a curse because we as humans have the power to utilize the magic of making matters worse or the magic of making matters better. Which way are you choosing to sculpt out, to carve out the reality in your life? Imagine that you have a special knife. You know, Philip Pullman wrote a book that I love, and in that book he talks about the subtle knife. Well, imagine that you have a subtle knife, a very sharp knife, and you get to sculpt out how your reality for the day is going to be. And as I heard an old gentleman say one time, in the mornings you get to get out of bed. I think he was a minister. He said you get to get out of bed and say, "Oh me," or "Amen." Amen literally means "so be it," by the way. And what is it that you're saying? And we have today in the art lab our very special, not guest, but our T-ball team. And we have Sarah, and she's running our control. She's our tech expert. Our other tech expert, our graphics queen, is Heather. And then Debbie is helping us run the show from her end of things, doing a lot of editing and a lot of proofing. It, you know, as I say, it takes a village to raise a child. It takes a whole team to do a podcast, and we're very proud of our T-ball team. And we thank you for being part of the T-ball team. Let me give a shout out to our community breakfast that we have every Saturday, by the way. If you would like to join our T-ball community breakfast, all you have to do is text T-ball, that's T-B as in ball, A-L, to 1-870-686-4196. That's 870, you have to put a 1 in front of it, 1-870-686-4196. That's complimentary. There's no membership fee. We just get together every Saturday, 9 a.m. Central Time. That's Chicago time. I said CST to a gentleman the other day, and he said, you know, that's China Standard Time, because he was in China. And I thought, well, gosh, I'll have to start saying that's Chicago time also. But text T-ball to 1-870-686-4196, and then you can celebrate your weekly wins with the whole T-ball community. We look forward to you being there. Okay, let's talk about the magic of making matters worse. And what has been your experience, ladies, in that area?
Something that I hear often, and I confess I've done this myself, is having the mindset of, well, I would rather think about the worst case scenario, so that way, you know, when it's not as bad as I thought it would be, you know, that'll be better than not being prepared for the worst thing that could happen. Am I the only one that's heard that or thought that way?
Yeah, no, I've definitely heard that too. Yeah.
I first heard that in an episode of Bewitched. Elizabeth Montgomery, was it?
Yeah, Elizabeth Montgomery.
And as a kid, that was one of my favorite shows. It was kind of a funny show. And she had magicked Benjamin Franklin from the 1700s. Gosh, I guess to, what was that, the 1970s. And he said that. He said that he likes to live such that, gosh, what was the quote? That he imagines the very worst, and then if something else happens, he can be pleasantly surprised.
Mm-hmm.
The question is, what's wrong with that? Is there anything wrong with that? What's the downside of that?
You're fretting
over
Yeah.
stuff that's not even happened, and like kind
Yeah.
of blowing it out of proportion, using those cognitive distortions like catastrophizing and
Fortune telling.
Fortune telling, yeah.
Yeah. That's
Yeah, I
true.
mean, it's about as if you would sit around, since it is possible to have a house fire, and as the meme goes, ain't nobody got time for that. As if there's a house fire, and you are telling your brain every moment there could be a house fire that starts, there could be a house fire that starts, there could be a house fire that starts. And what Heather's pointing out, I think that we're going to get to, and yes, we will get to it, is what's the neuroscience behind the magic of making matters worse? What's the neuroscience behind it? And I love teaching people how to be better programmers, better engineers of what your brain does. And here's a phrase that we try to post on everything. We first program our thoughts, and then our thoughts program our lives. I think we use the word engineer. We first engineer our thoughts, and then, it's a big then, it's a four-letter word, then our thoughts engineer our lives. And the question is, what kind of life are we going to decide to engineer? I will tell on myself, as they say in the South, and share a story from just a few days ago where, for whatever goofy reason, I decided to engage in the magic of making matters worse. I build things. I grew up building things. I grew up building houses with my dad, even working in concrete. Oh, concrete. No pun intended. That is really hard work. You get it? Concrete,
Yes.
hard,
Yes.
hard work. Okay, well, I do my best. I went to get some of this concrete at a local place that sells concrete. I won't call them out on air. No offense intended. But I went to get the concrete, and a super, super nice young man, so very helpful. Kind of odd at the place where I went. You don't actually find a lot of helpful people at actually this place of business, which is why I'm not calling out the name of the business on air. I don't want to be unnecessarily critical and name them. But he was super, super nice, just a wonderfully pleasant guy. And I was standing in line to buy other things, and he said, well, do you have more shopping to do? And I said, well, yes. I have to go get 2 bags of pool salt. And he said, fine, go get your pool salt. I'll start working on your order for your 5,000 pounds of concrete, 2.5 tons of concrete. That is, let me add it up, 62 80-pound bags of concrete. 62
Wow.
80-pound bags
lot
of
of
concrete.
concrete.
For some reason, in my head, it really sounds better telling myself you only have to unload 62 bags instead of you have to unload 5,000 pounds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That just sounds
It does.
difficult. I start to say bad, but just difficult. Well, I'm standing in line, and he comes back and he says, well, I've gotten your concrete ready to load up. Can you unhook your trailer, or do you want us to put it in the trailer? And I said, no, I'll unhook my trailer. You can put whatever it is, 3,800 pounds of it. The Ford company is going to send me letters. It's an F-250. I had one guy come up and said, you know, I'd be surprised if that Ford, because he's a Chevy guy, I'd be surprised if that Ford could haul that 3,800 pounds. You know, Ford people, Chevy people, Dodge people always kind of dissing on each other, as they say. But we're going to put 3,800 pounds in the back of this truck, and I went to unhook the trailer, and we're about to load it up after I've waited for an hour. At this point, tick, 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 it has been 1 hour. But you know, it's only 8 o'clock at night. What do I got to do? Oh, I know what I got to do. I got to get home and unload 5,000 pounds of concrete. That's what I've got to do. You know, snap, snap. Well, another young lady comes out and says, have you paid for that? And I said, well, no, ma'am, I've not, because this gentleman said, can you unhook your trailer? And I got out of line to unhook my trailer. Well, you got to come back in and pay for it. Well, I've got to go back in and get back in line and wait another, 30, 40 minutes to pay for the concrete? Do you often have concrete thieves? I mean, can you imagine I abscond with the concrete, all 5,000 pounds of it. And you call the police. Hurry, there's a concrete thief leaving the parking lot. Oh, but don't hurry, because the poor guy can only drive 20 miles an hour. By all means, stop and get a donut. He's not going anywhere very quickly. Is this usually a problem? I've not heard of concrete thieves in the paper. Maybe it's a new thing. And as you can tell, what am I doing? What's that magic word? I am catastrophizing. Yes. Instead of just embracing the experience and thinking, oh my goodness, isn't this going to be a great story that I can tell? No, 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 no. I decided to make it as worse as possible on myself by telling myself it was a what? I don't know, a level 10 catastrophe. And so what I did is I slowly began to recalibrate my catastrophe scale. And we'll talk about more of that later in the show, but that's my story. What the story that you guys have about catastrophizing and the magic of making matters worse in your lives?
Something that always comes to mind, that actually came to mind when we were thinking about this topic, was, little kids. So if you have a little kid and they fall down and scrape their knee, really the way that the parent or the guardian handles it makes a big difference. And I'll tell you what I mean. So if the parent comes up to them and they're like, oh, you're okay, get up, you're not bleeding, you're fine, or even if you are, let's slap a Band-Aid on it, get right back out there. Then they're just like, okay, yeah, sure, let's do it. But if the parent comes up to them and they're like, oh my gosh, you hurt your knee, oh my goodness, you poor thing, you gotta come inside, you can't play anymore. It completely changes. The kid who was kind of a little bit upset before is now bawling because they think something horrific has happened.
You're bleeding out through the knee.
I know.
Yeah. The humanity, the blood loss.
Yeah, it's just something that I've seen periodically. But
well, that made me think of it. It was a horrible TikTok trend that was on for a long time. While back, but they would have a baby in their arms and then they'd like hit the wall or hit the chair or just something to make a loud noise, and then they'd start petting the baby's head and like, oh, it's okay, I'm sorry you hit your head, and then the baby would start crying, and I was like, that is so awful. But just because of like the way that they were talking to them, I guess like they were trying to say that, even if the baby doesn't hit their head, like, it reacts to the coddling and the sweet talk, and it's like, it's okay, baby, and they just would start crying. I was like, why would you want to make your child cry? That's awful. Yeah. But when Sarah was talking about how, parents react, it kind of can make the situation better or worse. It made me think of that because nothing happened. The baby was fine, like, but just from the parents' reaction to, they were reacting to their parents' reaction.
Let's say this is a 4-year-old, a 7-year-old, or even 11, 12, 13-year-old. What do you guys as clinicians think that the long-term fallout would be of being reared by a parent that catastrophizes every single scraped knee? What programming does that help the kid engage in?
Not wanting to do anything.
Catastrophizing.
Catastrophizing.
Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, going off, I'm going to catastrophize for a second about their catastrophizing, but if you think about, if they start to feel a little bit sick, instead of trying to really think about it, they're probably going to be like, oh my gosh, I'm sick, I can't go to work, I can't do anything, I got to stay at home, I can't go anywhere, or oh, I've hurt myself, I have to go to the ER, and maybe they just have a paper cut on their finger or something like that.
Exactly. The programming for a human begins really at birth, if not before birth. Certainly at birth. And the best thing that a parent can do, and sometimes it goes the other way, the worst thing a parent can do is normalizing. Let me go the worst way. Sadly, tragically, there are kids, of course, yes, that are abused, sexually abused, physically abused, and they come to see the world that way. They assimilate that into their knowledge banks of their brain, and they come to believe this is just the way it is. If people are going to be disrespectful to me, you can just expect it. people are going to be abusive to me. If I get in a relationship, that person's brain over assimilates. Assimilation, a healthy thing. It lowers the learning curve. Over assimilation, not a healthy thing. It just makes life tougher, but people over assimilate. Now, the other way is if you teach a kid that every boo-boo is a level 10 catastrophe, then, and I'm going to say this very carefully, every non-preferred event then becomes a level 10 catastrophe. Mm-hmm. But throughout life, you're going to have lots of non-preferred events. Imagine going through life thinking every one of them is a catastrophe, and we haven't really gotten into all of the neurology with catastrophizing and the magic of making matters worse, but I'll dip a little proverbial toe into it. This is my finger, but I'll dip a little toe into it here. And that is, you're really setting up your brain to engage in a whole series, a daisy chain of catastrophic responses, which are really healthy if it's actually a catastrophe.
This podcast is HIPAA compliant. No identifying patient information will be disclosed without permission from patients or guardians. All personal stories will be de-identified in order to comply with HIPAA, the NASW Code of Ethics, and the ethical principles of psychologists and Code of Conduct.
We like to bring you stories fresh from the therapy couch, and here is a story cobbled together over probably 30 years of my own experience. It's not related to any single patient, but it is something that I hear routinely and even heard today. I ask people where you think your emotions come from. What is it that manufactures emotions? And what I get is usually it is different events, situations, and circumstances. But think about that for a minute. If you farm out creation of your emotions to things that happen out there, well, that by definition puts you out of control. And I asked a person a question recently. I ask people this every day. Where is it that you think your emotions come from? And that's what they said. It comes from, my emotions come from other people. And I want to encourage you guys, take back your power and realize, like the topic today, your emotions are manufactured directly, and I mean directly, as we would say in the South, from how you decide to think about events, situations, circumstances. Our emotions are not manufactured by things out there, outside the vault of our skull. Our emotions are manufactured by how we decide to think of things inside the vault of our skull. Something to think about.
You're listening to Therapy Bites Art Lab, bite-sized therapy for your brain with Dr. Heath and the T-Ball team. The best advice on the net. No copay required.
One of my favorite parts of our episodes are our social media debates of the day. And this is actually less of a debate and more of a sincere question that we received on social media. We tackle a lot as one of our HVTs, our high value targets, the terms manipulation and toxicity. They're big pseudo-psychological nonsense memes going out. And the question was, what about in cases of abuse? Do manipulation and toxicity not occur when there's children? And our answer to that was, because we kind of team up on some of these answers, our answer to that was, it really just depends on the age of the child. As a child grows, they develop greater and greater and greater amounts of this important thing, one of the most wonderful things, free will. If you've ever dealt with a teenager, you know that teenagers love to exercise their free will. And so at a certain point, as the human brain ages and matures, the person can engage in more and more of their free will and come to understand that, wait a minute, no one can truly manipulate what's going on inside of my brain. No one can really make my neurons fire in a certain pattern. People grow and mature to the point that they realize I get to decide what I will think. That's why at Therapy Bites Art Lab, in the Art Lab, we teach people that manipulation certainly doesn't exist, because if it did, those in Ukraine could leverage it against Putin and he would surrender, or Putin could leverage it against Ukraine and they would surrender, or we would teach all teachers to use it and there would be no discipline problems, or we could let the IRS use it and there'd be no one that refused to pay their taxes because the IRS could manipulate people into paying their taxes. That's why we teach people, take your power back, because manipulation is simply a nonsense pseudo-psychological meme that seeks to do nothing but suppress your power of using your free will to take control of your own thoughts. Think about that for a few days and put your comments at the end in our podcast episodes, and we appreciate, as always, you tuning in.
Here's Heath and the T-Ball team.
And let me throw out a dirty word. Now, it's not a dirty word to most people listening, but this is a dirty word to my clinician brain. Here's your dirty word. It's not a 4-letter word, but it is a 4-syllable word. Try this on for size. Test this out. Experiment with this week. Overwhelming. Or overwhelmed, but overwhelming. If you go through your day telling your brain, oh, this was overwhelming, and that was overwhelming, this other thing was overwhelming, then what are you telling your brain? You're telling your brain to stay on high alert. Is 5,000 pounds of concrete overwhelming? No, but it is 5,000 pounds of concrete. And that was in my little blurb earlier. But 5,000 pounds of concrete, that's heavy, but it's not overwhelming unless it's sitting on my head.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, now that would be overwhelming because that would kill me. Here's a cool psychology trick. Change your programming by changing your programming language. Instead of saying it is overwhelming, why not try out, well, that's not my favorite thing to do. That's not my favorite thing to happen. I mean, it's like me eating onions. They're not my favorite things. But if somebody puts them on a burger, which I try not to eat a whole lot of burgers, no offense to the burger industry, we don't want the burger industry to sue us, but you should eat them rarely, and I don't mean as the opposite of well done, I mean infrequently. But if you put onions on my burger, I can, not my favorite thing. I wouldn't have put onions on my burger, but I'll go ahead and eat it. Not the worst thing, but not my most preferred thing. Is it overwhelming? Are the onions going to overwhelm me? Well, no, not unless you poison them with antifreeze or something. Your new definition, art labbers, accurate, realistic thinkers, life-affirming believers, that's Art Lab, A-R-T-L-A-B. Art Labbers, your new assignment, your new mission, should you choose to accept it, cue the Mission Impossible music, is to change your programming by changing your programming language. Start to see things not as overwhelming unless they're going to kill you. Here's a few examples. If you were here at the art lab, we have a pool outside, and I wouldn't because this would just be rude and illegal, held your head underwater for 15 minutes, unless you're David Blaine, you will just die because you will drown. That is overwhelming. If I were to carry you to the top of this new building that we're finishing and dangle you by your ankle and drop you off on your head, that is overwhelming because you would just die. If I were to put you in a U-sized microwave and cook you for 15 minutes, you would go and that would be overwhelming because there's a graphic picture. It's still Halloween for us. This episode's going to drop after Halloween, but we try to push out Halloween as long as possible because we love it. You would go and you would die, and that's overwhelming. Unless it's something that would cause you to die, there's no need in leveraging all that catastrophe equipment that would help you run from a grizzly bear, that would help you run from someone with a knife or a gun or a mummy or a werewolf or a vampire. Unless it's going to kill you, really reconsider calling it overwhelming. And I'll get more specific with the neurobiology of that, the physiology of that, here in a couple of minutes toward the end of our episode. So stick around. What are some other catastrophizing events you guys have had in your personal lives?
I did one when I was taking my licensure exam, because in the past, testing has been difficult. And so I was like, well, just prepare for failure. And then if you pass, it's a good thing. And if you fail, then you're not going to be super disappointed. But looking back, it's like, well, that I was prepared. And if, like, looking back at it, like, if I would have really looked at and thought about, well, how that's, kind of just preparing myself for the failure and preparing myself, kind of that self-fulfilling prophecy. Like, it's like, if you're thinking about, well, I'm going to fail anyways, it's like, well, then you've got the mindset of, well, then why prepare? Why do this? Because it's going to happen. It's inevitable. But if I would have thought about it and been like, well, I can pass this. This is going to go great. I've got this. There's not a, you can do it. Then I would have gone in with more confidence rather than having that, like, seed of kind of uncertainty building.
Because your brain, what you're telling your brain, prepares what comes next. And imagine a pro-level athlete, Tiger Woods on the golf greens, before he takes his putt, saying, "You're going to miss it. You're 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 going to miss it." I guarantee you he does not do that. He may even have a coach historically who has taught him not to do this. If you're a famous football player and Mahomes, and before you throw the ball, you say, "You're going to screw it up, you're going to fumble it, 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 you're going to fumble it," then you have a higher chance of doing just that, because you've actually forecast failure.
Right.
Stop forecasting for failure. Stop forecasting for failure. Do an experiment, and I've done this experiment with kids because we have a basketball court at the art lab, and I've taken the kid out there because, kids will come and they'll say, "This sucks, I don't want to come to therapy," and I'll say, "I'll make you a deal. We will do 10 minutes of therapy for every 10 minutes on the ball court." Now, by the way, we're still doing therapy on the ball court, but don't tell anybody. Shh, keep that a secret. We'll do 10 minutes of therapy for every 10 minutes on the ball court, and they're up for that. And I've had several kids where I've had them take 10 free throws, and this is experiment. I want you to pretend that you are your favorite NBA ball player. I mean, you are famous. You're so good. Take your 10 shots. Well, they'll do pretty good. It's a 7 out of 10. I had a basketball coach that I'll just say he would severely discipline us if we missed a free throw, because he believed that if you're not being guarded, you know exactly where the shot's coming from. It's not up in there. And by the way, I was a horrible basketball player. But he believed that there was no reason to miss a free throw. And it amazes me, all these pros, that they miss free throws regularly. My coach would just, he'd be so devastated. He would punish them by doing stairs and laps and all that kind of stuff. But I'll have these young people take free throws, and they'll do pretty good. 6 out of 10. Some are really good. Some have hit 10 out of 10. But here's the twist. At the next interval of therapy of 10 minutes, we would specifically address all the nasty things others have told them. Bullies at school, bullies at home, parents who've engaged in some types of abuse. And now therapy segment of 10 minutes is over. It's time to take some more shots. And usually, do you know how many shots these kids will make? 0. None. Because they have sculpted out the reality of them as a failure in their minds, in that point, in that moment. Within 10 minutes, it has changed, literally changed and reduced their abilities. Therefore, what we recommend is approach it with evidence. What have I done to prepare myself for this ball tournament, for this test, for this speech, for this whatever goal I have? What have I done? What is the evidence here? And then go with the evidence. What evidence do I have that I'm going to fail? Do I have a me-sized time machine that I could jet myself as if I'm one of the Jetsons into the future and see myself failing, and then I come back and I tell myself, yep, you screwed up. You're a failure. Big, stinking failure. Well, no, you can't do that, so you don't know that you would have failed. But if you program that ahead of time, you astronomically, exponentially increase the chances of not doing well. Better to paint a different picture. And when I say paint a picture, and here's, again, a little bit of the neuroscience of it, we literally are painting a, name your famous artist, Michelangelo, whoever.
Bob Ross.
Who?
Bob Ross.
Yeah. Degas, whoever. Of yourself either succeeding or failing. And you have imprinted that in your mental network. Why would you choose to paint a picture of yourself as a failure when you now know it has such power? What are your thoughts?
No, that I actually have an example of that from, gosh, was that yesterday or the night before last? I was doing laundry, and I went to go check on the dryer because I usually take the t-shirts out sooner so they don't get, worn out. And I noticed that my dryer had turned off, but there was still 20 minutes left that it should have been, working. And so I pressed the button, nothing happened. Pressed it again, opened the door, shut the door, pressed it again, and I was like, hey, honey, I think our dryer has gone out or something. And so he came in and looked at it. He pressed the button, did everything I did, and he was like, oh my goodness, oh no. And so of course my first thought was, oh no, our dryer is just completely toast, we're gonna have to get a new dryer. And then I was thinking, well, you know what, but what can I do about this? So I got on YouTube and I looked up like common problems with dryers and found a video that was like 3 things that it's possible have messed up on your dryer if it doesn't start, if it's just the start button, which that seemed to be the problem. So I looked into it. It ended up being, I borrowed my husband, he's a electrician apprentice, I borrowed his multimeter and tested a couple things, and I found out it was the thermal fuse in the back of the dryer, which is about $6 for 3 of them on Amazon. And I was like, okay. So that's that could have gone completely different, because if I would have just catastrophized the situation, called in a mechanic, it would have been, $100+ to find out that you need a $6 part off of Amazon. So it could have gone very differently.
And that's great, because my life motto, and we're going to put a t-shirt of this, a Therapy Bites themed t-shirt and coffee mug. I'm not sure if we have it up there yet, but we've been planning on it. We love coming up with new grand ideas of t-shirts and merchandise on our Therapy Bite store. Everything is figure-outable.
Yeah.
Everything is figure-outable. Number 2, though, you don't have to figure it out right now. I will go to bed many nights. How are we going to do this? How are we going to do that? Gosh, I don't know. But just asking my brain the problem, the question about the problem, puts my brain to work, puts my neurons to work on that, and it amazes me. Now, some things have taken days, weeks, months, but everything is figure-outable. What have you guys discovered along those lines?
Oh goodness, an example just this past week. My husband and I took a little trip to Florida, and we learned something new. We learned that when you book a hotel room, if you don't let them know by 11:59 that you're going to be there after 11:59, your room gets given away to somebody else. So we got there about 1 o'clock in the morning, just to find out that sure enough they had given our room away to someone else. and so at that point it was kind of like, okay, what are we going to do tonight? And it was figure-outable. We already had things in plan, like, well, we could stay at a rest area and sleep in the car. I mean, that's a possibility. There's a lot of truck drivers doing that, so it felt safe. It was always okay. Or we ended up finding another place to stay, which was really neat. At 2:00 in the morning, we found a place that had vacancies, and it all worked out.
Wow.
And it was figure-outable. We didn't get upset. We didn't catastrophize. We didn't, oh no, and let it ruin the trip.
Yeah.
We actually laughed about it. It became something
Well,
fun.
and I want to point out what you're doing is it's not quite as easy as we just didn't get upset. There has to be a lot of cognitive programming that goes on before we just didn't get upset.
Yes.
There is no
Yeah.
magic in this.
No.
We just didn't get upset.
Right.
And Debbie kind of indicated that when she talked about how they decided to think about it. And that one of those steps was, hey, we can figure this out. Step number 2, how big of a catastrophe is this? Is it a level 10? Is it a level 2? Is it a level 0.02? You get to decide how catastrophic something is, but beware that decision, how you decide to think about it, how I decide to think about it, is going to make all the difference in what emotions are produced simply, strictly, solely based on how you're deciding to think about it. Which leads us now at the end of our show, because we're about out of time for today, that neurobiology of the magic of making matters worse. Imagine a grizzly bear comes out of the woods. I've never met a grizzly bear. I never hope to meet one, but I can tell you anyhow, I'd rather see than be one. That comes from the Purple Cow poem in nursery rhyme books that I read as a kid. But what happens is your brain identifies the grizzly bear as a threat, and then your brain starts doing a number of very interesting things. It leverages norepinephrine. It's kind of like jet fuel in your bloodstream. It sends a signal to shut down different things in your body and turn on different things. One of the things that your brain shuts off when you're telling yourself there's a level 10 or level 9 or 8, 7, 6 catastrophe is it shuts down blood flow to your stomach. If you ever wonder why I get so sick at my stomach in a tense situation, it's because you've told your stomach to do that. You just didn't know it. It happened at the level of implicit processing. IM.P. Imp, it's a little demon, implicit processing that happens beneath your level of conscious awareness. If you don't want your stomach to shut down, then stop telling yourself that this is a level 10, 9, or 8, or 7, or 6 catastrophe. It may be non-preferred, but non-preferred does not equal catastrophic. And then there's a whole host of other things, increases in cortisol, changes in blood flow from one part of the brain to the other, from mainly the frontal lobe to more central core amygdala. And why? Because you told yourself that not getting a hotel room, if it's Debbie's case, or me, not getting checked out at the store as rapidly as I would prefer, has become the same over-assimilation, has become the same as a grizzly bear chasing me through the woods, and he's going to eat my legs, and he's a zombie grizzly bear, and he's going to eat my brain. It's a zombie grizzly bear. He's eating legs and brains. Hurry, run away. Well, goodness. Why would I do that to myself if I have a choice? And that's what we want to leave you with today. You have a choice. Are you going to grizzly bear it, or are you going to decatastrophize it? Just because it's what I don't prefer, are you going to decatastrophize it? And there's a joke that y'all are going to have to tell me later because I just missed the whole thing. I guess it's on screen. Sarah's popping up funny things on the screen there.
Oh no, I just got it late.
Oh, you got it late. Okay.
Sometimes, yeah.
It went over my head and
Better late than never.
and then I just kind of was like, oh
Okay.
wait.
Thank you for joining us today. Catch the next episode.
Bye,
Bye-bye, guys.
Bye.
Hey, T-Ballers, Dr. Heath here with your secret side disorder of the day. There is a syndrome, a phenomenon, a psychological disorder that many of you may not be familiar with, and it is called derealization. In instances of severe or acute stress or abuse, or with PTSD, patients often report derealization and depersonalization. Let's take derealization. This is the phenomenon of thinking that I am detached or somehow not connected with the reality of what's out there. I'm disconnected from that. It is really kind of something that is meant to keep us safe. If you're undergoing a severe traumatic event, if you can disconnect yourself from that, then somehow that engenders the belief that you're more safe, because it's not really you engaging in that event, situation, circumstance. But here's the problem, and I challenge you guys, do some Googling. I don't often say that, but I challenge you to do some Googling, because what you will find are those that talk about this phenomenon, they get it wrong. How do they get it wrong? Because they label it as a feeling of derealization. There is no feeling of derealization. There are emotions and there are feelings, and those consist of happy, sad, mad, glad, disgusted, ashamed, stressed, depressed, anxious, angry. None of those emotions are evidence that you are detached from reality. The problem is if you start to connect an emotion with an experience, then every time you have that emotion, then you'll believe that you're once again having that experience. Here's a better idea. Ground yourself in your thinking. Ask yourself, what am I thinking in the moment? The more you focus on your thinking, the more you can increase the health of what's going on inside of your brain. What are some nifty ways to do that? I'm here sitting on a couch. I'm talking into a camera. I can feel the glasses on my face. I can feel my fingertips. Therefore, no matter what other feelings you're having, you can know that you're still here, that you still exist, and mostly, you can know that you're still safe. There is no emotion that means that you're not safe. Yes, there's some difficult emotions, but none of those mean that what's out there has become unreal. None of those mean that you have become unreal. They're simply emotions that you can observe, like clouds passing in the sky, and like clouds passing in the sky, you can let them just float on their way and radically accept their course across the view of your experience. Think about it.
And now it's time for the Psych Quote of the day. Today's Psych Quote is by Carl Jung. Mistakes are, after all, the foundations of truth. And if a man does not know what a thing is, it's at least an increase in knowledge if he knows what it is not.
Hey, T-Ballers. Thanks so much for being with us today. If we brought value to your day, show us some love by leaving your positive feedback and inviting some friends to listen in and join the T-Ball team. Next time on Therapy Bites Art Lab.
Why must I not be angry? Do I have to go through my entire life not experiencing a very human emotion called anger? I mean, do I need to go to the hospital and have an angerectomy? Do I need to have the anger police come and arrest me and put me in anger jail? Hey, this is Dr. Heath. That's just a little display that most people think should not be allowed in relationships because others think that it is so threatening. Today, we're going to tackle one of our high-value targets. What's the problem with anger? Coming up next.